all the things that it does. Clarifying, making sure you get it correct. So those are important parts of it. And then the reflecting, a lot of times we say reflective listening, that's pulling in the emotional aspect. That's the empathy that a lot of you were talking about when you were talking about Margaret and the video. And the key in it, it's acknowledging emotions. And the key with acknowledging emotions is purely well, it's two things. It's one, being genuine and real, and being able to really empathize. And that takes a lot of personal work if it's not something that you do naturally. Some people will do that naturally or learn to do it really well. If that's not something that you bring to the table, that's something you're going to have to work on. But part of it is also technique. A lot of times in training, people are not acknowledging the emotions of the parties. And in particular, that's important when it's an obstacle. We cannot get to the problem-solving stage and the parties talking about how to resolve this when the emotions are still there. And if no one's addressed those, that's still an obstacle. So there's a real purpose. It's not to be touchy-feely or to be a therapist here. There's a real purpose to doing it, to help the parties get past that and to work on an agreement. A lot of times people are inhibited from doing that because they feel they'll lose their neutrality or their impartiality. And the trick to it is just not to be agreeing with them. And for the most part, not using an I statement. If I'm working one-on-one with you, I might use I statements because I'll say, Mike, I feel, this is what happens when you do this. So I'm talking about myself. When you're the mediator, you want to do the opposite. You want to put it on them. And the next page also talks about that on acknowledging emotions, page 3-6. What you'd want to say, and you can use all the different senses. So you seem really frustrated, or it sounds very frustrating. I see you are frustrated. I mean, you can vary the senses, meaning see and sound and hear and feel, so it doesn't become a pattern that they think you're just doing it and it's not sincere, but you're putting it on them. You're just saying, so you are this way. And you know what? If you get it wrong, they will let you know, so you've learned some information, and then you correct, oh, I'm sorry, so you're really angry. I mean, this has really made you mad. Yeah, that's it. Good, you've done it. So that's part one. And so you can have a lot of empathy. The more empathy you have, as long as you're not agreeing with them, the better in a mediation. Part two is then giving them the space to talk about it. So, Mike, you were really mad. Yeah, tell me more about that. What we see a lot in training is people knowing they need to acknowledge some emotions. So they say, okay, so you were mad. Now, if you go to court, what's going to happen? But they just completely switch out of it and haven't given that person the opportunity to get it out. If you give them that opportunity, then you'll be able to move on. Okay? Does that make some sense? Okay. If we go back to page 3.3, this is the last couple comments before we'll go get something to eat. These A through E is the real reason why active listening is so crucial. It's going to let the other person or the people know that you're listening. So that's on a cerebral level, but on an emotional level, they're going to also feel that you're listening. You're going to make sure that they're understood correctly, and that's what begins the trust. If you do all that, that builds the trust, and then you're going to get the better information. And so part of what's going on by following the process and using good communication skills is that rapport and trust building. And that will help people confide in you, help you get more information out on the table, and ultimately there'll be much more to work on for the parties to potentially reach an agreement. Okay. Any questions?
I would think overlapping questions would help, or overlapping comments. Someone's pausing, they can't quite articulate what they're feeling in a way, and they feel you're on the same page with them if you complete the sentence for them.
I would think that's true, and it would be on a case-by-case basis. So, and if that's the intent, and it's not just a visual thing, which it might be with me, that it's helping to build a connection, I can see how that would work. I've also see it a lot in training where, in fact, I'm playing a party and someone has completed my thought, or they've asked a question and they've kind of, I didn't answer and they moved in a different direction, how I was about to tell them some really good stuff. So, you know, it can work both ways. But I think that's relevant to what you say.
With acknowledging emotions, would you do that more in a caucus than in a group discussion? Because sometimes it seems as if it would sound like you're being more friendly with that person to the other person.
Yeah. What I would say, excellent question. From my perspective, I'm ready to do it from the very beginning of the party's initial statement. The key is balance. I look at impartiality and neutrality more as balance. So, and it's situational. So someone can give me their initial statement where I'm just listening to them, and they're really mad. And so when I do my summary, and you know, I will summarize back to that. So you were really mad when she came in and pushed you. Yeah, that's it. And that's okay, because I'm not agreeing with it. This person can be upset, and then you just correct it and say, oh, you know, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to agree. I was just trying to make sure I understood how she felt, and I'm going to want to know how you feel too. And so that's how you would correct it. And the trick, though, is a lot of times in crosstalk, you may need to work with one person and deal with their emotions a little bit. And then you need to remember, even if this other person isn't being quite as emotional, you're going to want to look for those opportunities too to keep the balance. So the trick is balance. And then obviously it's easier in caucus, but there's many times early on that you may need to do it in order to calm them down. But you know, some of the really volatile situations you want to do it. So I would say look for opportunities to do it all the time. And a quick restating works too, where you know, so you were feeling really angry at Kathy when this happened, and then Steve, you know, you also were angry because it was interfering with how you wanted to use your property. Boom, nice balance. Mike?
If you kind of tie it into the first lecture where they were talking about competing and avoiding emotions, is it appropriate at some point to ask, how did you feel?
Yeah, I think it is an appropriate question. On the other side, I wouldn't want to be asking all the questions in terms of how you feel. But to ask how they felt, that's a relevant question. It's not mandatory that that's a question you have to ask, but if you feel that will be helpful, yeah. And giving, a lot of times people who don't directly acknowledge the emotions, they're still pretty effective with the emotions because they are giving the person the space. They may ask, well, you know, how did you feel when that happened? And they're giving them the opportunity to emote. So that would be relevant. Other questions so far?
Do you want to ask questions during the open statement? That would prolong it. The other person ill at ease, wouldn't it?
During the initial statements?
Yeah, initial statement.
Another really good question. Let's save that one. I'm going to talk about effective questioning after lunch. So don't forget it. Did Andy talk about why we have questions up here? Okay. Because a lot of times we're going to have to move on, or we're going to cover a question later, but we don't want to lose the question, so we'll put it up there and we'll get it at the end of the day or the beginning of the next day. But that's one I think I'll address a little bit later, and Lisa Fielding, our Manager Mediation Services Coordinator, is going to be talking about process. She may cover it a little bit too, so we'll come back to that. Other questions? And I will put this one up on the board. But I want all of us to have a little bit of lunch. So let's take a break, and then when we come back, I'll talk more about some communication skills. And I'll show you where lunch is. Okay, we're back to continue the effective communication skills part of the mediation training. Were there any questions on active listening, acknowledging emotions, summarizing, restating, silence, all those wonderful topics we covered? Is it crystal clear? Good, because I'm going to give you a quiz. So what I'm going to do is read a very short monologue that you could hear possibly a complainant or a respondent, probably a complainant, telling you in a mediation. And so I want you to listen carefully to it. At the end of it, I will ask you 8 questions, and I will want you to just answer each question silently to yourself. You can write a little note if you would like. And then after I've asked all 8 questions, we'll come back and talk about it. Okay? Ready? Okay. On Wednesday, I came out of the apartment at 7:30 on the way to work. I was hurrying as I had to be on time. At the bottom of the stairs, I tripped over an umbrella left by this guy, Andy Miller, who did not want a wet umbrella in his apartment. I twisted my ankle and seriously hurt my hand and messed up my hair. I had a very hard time typing at work, and I got in trouble with my boss. Luckily, when I pulled myself together after the fall, my carpool was still waiting. I brought my friend today, Lisa, who was there and saw all the injuries, as a witness. That afternoon, I went to see my lawyer, Mr. Sharp, at 1358 Broadway, who said I could sue Miller. I called Miller to work it out, but he hung up on me. Okay, question number 1, just to yourself. Did I get to work on time? If I end up going too fast, slow me down. Question number 2, name one person in my carpool. Question 3, what is the address of Mr. Sharp's law office? Question 4, what injuries did I sustain? Number 5, whose umbrella did I trip over? Number 6, what type of job do I have? Number 7, how did Andy Miller feel when I called? Number 8, the bonus question, what time did I leave my apartment? Okay, question number 1, now we can talk about it as a group. Did I get to work on time?
No.
Any other answers? I heard no.
Yes.
I heard yes, I heard no. Any?
We don't know.
Okay, I heard it, I don't know. Okay, the correct answer is we don't know.
Right.
We make some assumptions based on how this is that I did get to work on time, but we don't know. We have not said it at all, whether I got to work on time. Just said the carpool was there. Okay? Number 2, did I, name one person in my carpool. Lisa?
Lisa saw the entries, we don't know.
No, oh, that's right, we don't know.
Okay,
Don't know.
same
I'm
answer.
catching on.
Exactly. So the first 2 questions are we don't know. And it becomes clear that this exercise is really on assumption making and how easy it is to do that. And most of us in this room are probably going to make good assumptions. I mean, maybe 90, 99%, I don't know. You might be correct, but there are some mediations that the only reason why the parties are in the room is that they made some assumptions. And the last thing you want to do as mediator is to join in the assumption making, which is another reason for summarizing, restating, and clarifying, is just to make sure the communication lines are clear. Number 3, I assure you there is an answer. So number 3 is, what is the address of Mr. Sharp's law office?
1358 Broadway.
Broadway. Okay, I heard a lot of different numbers, but you are correct. 1358, whoever had that, Broadway. The only reason we have this in here is just to remind people, you get a lot of different people at the table. Numbers usually take at least one of the persons in the room time to digest, and you just need to be careful with numbers. If there's a lot of numbers involved, just be real careful with it. Sometimes some of the major disagreements are mathematical errors, and people got confused, so you just want to be careful with that. Number 4, what injuries did I sustain?
Ankle.
An ankle
And wrist.
I think I,
Hair.
Messed up her hair.
my hair got, I used to have hair before this, but now it's gone. This question I should throw out when I do this. You're all right. It was the ankle and the hand and then the hair. Believe it or not, there's still some gender bias. If a woman were doing this that actually has hair, then a lot of times people just focus on the hair and not the actual injuries. But we should just throw that one out. Number 5, whose umbrella did I trip over?
Andy Miller.
Now he said, he didn't want a wet umbrella in his apartment, but we don't know that was good.
Correct. We don't know. This one is the most, this is the one where maybe we're tricking you the most. But the thing, it's a point we want to make. It's my story. I'm alleging it. So I'm the one telling you this. I believe it's his, but how do I know? Is it an umbrella right outside his door? Maybe I've seen it, maybe I haven't. Thing to always remember in a mediation is that you're hearing people's stories. We don't know what's real or not real. And many times I've been in a mediation, I listen to the first person, oh my God, this person, oh, that's awful. I listen to the next person, really? You know, I mean, you hear their perspective. And again, it's not even a system. Mediation is not a process even set up to find out what's real or not real. But just remember, it's their stories. It may be true, it may not. It may be their perception. That's fine. Just use your active listening skills on it. Number 6, what type of job do I have?
Don't know.
Okay.
Something
You
involves
need to
typing.
type.
Good. You caught on.
Typing.
I'm not a typist. Okay. We don't know. How did Andy Miller feel when I called?
Don't know.
Good. Now, a lot of times people make the assumption based on an action. So, in a very logical one, he hung up on me.
He's angry.
He's mad. But we actually don't know. Could have been a lot of different things. So again, this is a short exercise to make sure you don't make the assumptions. Number 8, what time did I leave my apartment?
7:30.
Excellent answer. We don't know if it's AM or PM. I could be working at night. So you got it. So this was our short little exercise on being real careful in mediations about assumptions and not making them as a mediator. We have some very experienced mediators who can tell you stories of some very fundamental, basic, logical assumptions that they made, and 2 or 3 hours later, I mean, they didn't even think it was an assumption they were making. They weren't aware of it, but it turns out, you know, they find out some information that just changes the entire mediation because everyone, a lot of the parties and the mediator were thinking one thing, and it turned out very differently. So it's something that you just want to be really aware of. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. We're going to switch to neutralizing language as one specific tool that you can use in a mediation to help with diffusing some of the emotion at the table if you think it's necessary. Right now, I'm going to talk about this as a very singular tool, okay, neutralizing language. But everything we're talking to you about this entire day, usually there's a whole bunch of different things that are going on simultaneously. And you have a lot of different options. So just because we're talking about neutralizing language doesn't mean you're going to neutralize everything anybody says. But we want to make sure you understand neutralizing language and what it means and give you a little opportunity to practice it. In a mediation, you just take the parties' initial statements. Parties are going to may say a lot of inflammatory things. And we've told you, or we are going to tell you in the initial statement, that you're going to have to summarize back most of what that person is saying to you. And if that's true, and they're saying all these nasty inflammatory language items about the other person, you know, how do you restate it by capturing their meaning? You don't want to disregard what they have to say to you, but maybe toning it down a little bit. And it applies to when you restate during the entire course of the mediation, okay? So that is what we're talking about. We're going to do some practice. If you turn to page, we're still on this tab 3, and it's actually, the exercise is near the back.
3-9.
3-9, right. Now before you begin, I want to let you know all these statements are statements that we've actually heard in a mediation, so these aren't out of the blue. I want you to assume for this exercise that they are in the party's initial statement, so you don't have a choice. You have to summarize it, and in fact, it's an essential issue of the mediation. If it weren't an essential issue, you wouldn't have to restate it back. So this is something you would have to restate. And again, this is really out of context. It's an artificial exercise. There's probably 50 different other things you could do besides neutralize language. But what you want to do is restate it, okay? So you don't want to be asking a question right now. It's actually a restatement. So when you look at these, take a moment. We're going to take a few minutes just to yourself, write out some more neutral ways of capturing the meaning. So you would be saying this right back to the party, but without some of the inflammatory language. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on what I'm asking you to do? Okay. Did you have a question?
The question, can we put it into you perceive or you believe?
Absolutely.
Or do you want to?
Right, just a
do a trans?
No, no, no. In fact, that's an excellent way to do it. But just don't do it in a question. You want to make it a restatement. So they've said this, and you're in conversation, and just restate it back. Okay, I think I realize not everyone's quite finished, but I'm going to start because I think after the first three, you pretty much have a sense of this. So what I'd like to do is hear how you would neutralize her house is an absolutely disgusting, trashy disgrace. Yes, Brian.
So what I'm hearing is she doesn't keep her house to your liking.
I think that's a real nice way of making it much more neutral. And to her liking is putting it on her. So I think that's nice. Other people have other versions. Deborah?
Her house isn't up to your standards.
Okay. I think that's much more neutral and putting it, it's her judgment. So I think that's getting there. Actually, a far towards getting there. Yes?
Your concern with the insurance for her house?
Okay, I think that's real neutral. And that captures it. And then the question you always have is the person might say, no, I said it's a trashy, disgusting disgrace. And they say, okay, so you really think it's disgusting. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's back on them. But that was a good example of a neutral language, but still keeping the meaning. So it's similar, I had down, so the condition of the house really affects you. You don't like the way she keeps house, you're unhappy with how she keeps house, all those type of things is a nice way of doing it. And the key is really what Maria asked me right at the beginning, was putting it on them. You know, you feel this way. And that keeps you out of trouble, and it helps to neutralize it. Okay. Let's do number 2. I know they play that loud, hideous music in order to deafen the whole neighborhood. Who would like to do that? Mike?
I said your perception is that the volume of the music has a negative effect on the neighborhood.
Okay. It's definitely much more neutral, so I think that works. One question, the hard part about this neutralizing and the hard part about mediation is doing it in a split second. So, and that's the part of mediation, though, that I love, is that you're making, you're going one direction as the mediator, and you're listening to the person, and then they say, you ask a question, they say something, so I have to think to myself really fast. Okay, do I want to go the direction I was still going in, or, you know, they just said this, do I want to deal with that now? And guess what, I got this person sitting here at the same time, and there's just all these quick decisions, and that's what you were talking about a little bit too with timing with Margaret, you know, when you do things and where you go. And there are no right or wrongs, I mean, there are judgment decisions all the time. At first, that makes it challenging and awkward. Once you're more experienced, it makes it really, really fun. So that's one thing I like about it. Who has another example? Somebody was, Darius, were you going to do it, or no, you don't have to?
They play their music much too loud for you.
Okay. Again, I think that's much more neutral, and I'm going to come back and talk about one component of that, but I want to hear a couple others. Yeah, Tracy.
They play music that you believe is loud enough for the neighborhood to hear.
Okay. Good. I mean, that's similar. It's making it much more neutral. Any other last version that someone might have, Catherine?
So you're concerned with the volume of music?
Okay. Good. Very neutral. The one point I would make, and if I were in a mediation, I probably wouldn't even catch this, but we want to make the point. The word loud is a judgment word. There's a value judgment in the fact that the person's saying it's loud. And that's just something to be aware of even when you're neutralizing. So one way you might get around that, I think you may have used the word sound level or volume. Volume is still there too. So, but you're concerned about the sound level at which the music is being played. again, it's just to be aware of how certain words will be loud, because loud to that person may be a whisper to the other person. So it's just little word choices that you want to be careful of. A lot of mediation is how you say things as the mediator. And part of my skill as a mediator is because I've mimicked a lot of really good mediators I've watched, and actually mimicked a lot of first-time trainees. So as a trainer, I get to steal from everyone, and as a mediator. You hear something somebody says, and oh boy, that works. And as a mediator, may have been trying to do the exact same thing, but a key word or a certain way I was phrasing it just doesn't work, but the way another person does, it does. So I also encourage you in the practice sessions and simulations to really be listening to how your fellow participants are saying things. Some things you're going to hate and say, well, I think I would have said it this way. Other things you're going to want to write down and say, oh, this is really good. I'm going to remember this. So that's a big part of it. Number 3, he always acts like a jerk, calling me sweetie and little girl. Yeah, Judith.
His use of language seems inappropriate to you.
Okay, good. Nice
I
job.
don't feel he treats me in an adult fashion.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting way of doing it, Dick, because I think you've neutralized it and restated. At the same time, you're almost testing what their meaning may be. So you know what I mean? Say that one more time. What you just had you just restated, or did I pick up something?
No, that's right.
Okay. Say how you
He's not
restated.
treating me he's not treating me in an adult fashion.
Okay. And because one of the things, it may not be quite just neutralizing a restatement, but one of the things you can do sometimes as a mediator is test something by restating something back, but making a little leap from what they've said to try to see if they're really saying something else and to catch it. So it might not be exactly neutralizing language as we mean it, but it is a good technique as a mediator to use sometimes.
Do I understand that you don't want sweetie, or is that jumping the gun?
Actually, that's a great example, Paula, of almost the next step after you would neutralize it. So what I had down was you don't like how he refers to you or addresses you as a nice, and I should have called him. And so I think a lot of you were shaking your head that that's what you had. So that would be a neutral way of stating it back. And then a logical mediator question would be to follow up on that. How would you like to be addressed? And again, you're going to be doing all these things at different times. So you could have just asked the question, not even neutralized. So that would have been fine. Margaret?
Is it bad to put in there sweetie and little girl reiterated? I had it in there, but.
Yeah, for this exercise, what we were working on practicing with would have been to take those out, because those are the inflammatory words.
Okay.
In a real mediation, I actually think it will be a judgment call, depending on what's happening when, of whether or not you're going to want to take out words or restate them. Sometimes mediators do find it effective to keep those words in there, because you really are working with that person to gain that rapport and trust, and you don't want them to think that you're downplaying it, or you may have some other motivation for it. Technically speaking, if we're talking about neutralizing language, those would be the things you'd want to take out.
Okay.
Okay, let's do number 4. She took the huge stick and attacked me with brutal force. Catherine's done a couple. Anybody else want to jump in with one? Good, Catherine. We'll go with you.
So then was this physical incident?
Okay, good. I mean, that's real neutral, and the question, the question always will be, do you go too far? Does the person that just made their statement feel that you're missing their meaning? And that will be the balance. But that was real neutral. Yvette?
You felt she used great force with the stick you perceived as huge?
Okay. No, that was good. The one thing we want to be careful of when we mediate, again, this is just to practice, and tomorrow when you practice, if you don't neutralize anything, that will be fine. This is something that will gradually come about, because otherwise, when you're really just focused on one thing, it may become a little awkward trying to wordsmith it. So that sounded just a little bit awkward, but it was, your intent was really good at neutralizing it. The reason why we had this in here actually was from a real case, and we actually have a simulation with it, where